Most people, what if practice is the performance? Most people spend their time focused on the end result, whether in arts, sports, looking for the perfect spouse, or in their career. And by doing so, they are missing out on one of the greatest joys in life. That's the joy of becoming the person they desire to be through discovering the joy of practicing. Practicing? Yes, you heard me correctly. Practicing. If you're like most people, you tend to dislike practicing. Because when you don't understand the value of practice, you see it as boring, repetitive, or even monotonous. As a musician, what I know to be true is that our attitude towards practice ultimately dictates how the performance goes. You see, I believe that the performance is practice on display. So let me tell you why I think practicing is where it's at. First of all, practicing, it rewires your brain. According to an abcnews.com article entitled, "Want to Rewire Your Brain? Study Music" by Lee Dye. He states that the longer the person has been performing on the instrument and the earlier they started taking musical training, the larger the effect. Neuroscientists have confirmed that practicing rewires your brain. Jonathan Herman, PhD, in his book, Practice Like This, found that myelin, a chemical in the brain that helps the brain develop when we learn a new skill. Myelin was first described by Rudolf Vikram in 1854, and they found that with myelin, neurons fire much faster with greater speed and efficiency. They also discovered that for violin players, that they actually have more myelin around the neurons that control the left hand, making that part of their brains bigger than non-violin players. Myelin and violin, they also rhyme. Dr. Norman Deutsch, in his book, The Brain That Changes Itself, says that the brain system is made up of many neuronal networks, and that if a network or a part of the brain gets blocked or damaged, our brains have the ability to work around those blocks and rewire themselves or reorganize its sensory perceptual system. So let me tell you how I discovered practicing. During my childhood, America experienced the Vietnam War, the assassination of John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr., and the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was a challenging time in America's history and in the world that I grew up in. And I would often sneak away and hide in a closet in my home, and I would grab my sister's red guitar. It had the white tuning knobs. And I'd sit in the closet and play. She didn't know I wanted to play it, and so I'd sit there and play. Well, one day, she found me. And she realized that she wasn't going to play that little red guitar. So she let me have it. Well, in more ways than one, as you can imagine, with a sister. But ever since then, I fell in love with learning to play and practice music. Then another problem came up. Started getting pretty good, and I joined the band with some friends. One of them was an amazing guitar player. And so I realized if I wanted to stay in the band, I had to up my game, because when I practiced the guitar, I would just kind of casually play rhythms and chords. But now I had to take up the bass. And the bass talks about the structure and the form of the music, and I had to figure out a whole new way of practicing. And that's when I discovered the principle of deliberate practice. What is deliberate practice? Deliberate practice, according to the American Psychological Association, is when an individual repeats an activity intentionally focused on improving their results. When a person practices according to the claim of the deliberate practice framework, it's necessary for a person to do that to achieve high levels of expert performance. Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz, in his book, The Mind and the Brain, he does a reference of an article by Robert DeSimmons, who's one of the leading researchers in the physiology of attention and neuroscience, and from the National Institute of Mental Health. And he states that attention, when we pay attention, it focuses the brain on the most important stimuli. When we do deliberate practice, our brains have the capacity to reduce distractions and improve focus. Remember that friend of mine who's a really good guitar player? Well, now, we're playing together, and I'm actually now playing at his level. And we really wanted to grow and expand, but we knew something was missing. In 1974, the Lakeland Civic Center in Central Florida on the East Coast of the United States was open. Before then, if you wanted to go see a major concert, you had to go to Tampa or Orlando, and being 12-year-olds, we couldn't drive. But now, with cutting some grass or doing a few errands, we got the chance to see the OJs live, the Commodores, Earth, Wind, and Fire, the Brothers Johnsons, even the Buddy Rich Orchestra. I remember going to see a concert with the Brothers Johnsons, and the bass player's nickname was Thunder Thumbs. I was so excited after that concert. I went back home. I stayed up to 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I bought a set of headphones that would amplify the sound but wouldn't disturb my family. And I'd sit there and I'd practice. And I found myself getting to a point where I could do what they were doing, and I was enjoying who I was becoming. And it dawned on me that most musicians spend 95% of their time practicing. They're only on stage maybe 5% of the time in their careers. So if you receive all of your joy from being on stage, you'd be unhappy 95% of the time waiting to get on stage. And what happens if the concert doesn't go well? You would have missed the joy of becoming the person you desire to be. So here I am in the latter part of my life, and I've been given this gift, the gift of practicing and learning. Little did I know that it would come into practice when on August 19th, 2018, I suffered a severe bout of vertigo. I was rushed to the hospital. I was there for a day and a half, and then I spent a week in bed, barely able to walk and balance. It had literally taken away my balance. The next weekend, I could finally sit up, and as I sat there, I wondered, would I be well enough to even do this talk? Then I prayed, and I remembered I was given a gift. So as soon as I could, I went and started practicing. And by the next weekend, I went to an outdoor church service with some friends and visited with them. The gift of practicing accelerated my brain's ability to balance itself. So I want you to step back and think about your life and your gifts. Think about the practicing that you have to do. I want you to embrace your practicing, whether it's music studies, art, sports, academics, whatever that may be. I want you to pick up your instrument and practice. In celebration of my recovery, I wrote a song to close out this talk. I called it Vertigo.